Okay, you'd asked about the history of the store. Uh, T.W. Hawkins came up from Roanoke, Virginia, uh, trying to strike it rich in gold. He headed for Dawson City in the gold rush of 1898. He got there too late for the gold claims. The good gold claims were already claimed. So he went on down the Yukon River to Nome, and Nome was booming at the time. He didn't do well as a gold miner, and started stores, grocery stores, I think it was, mainly in general merchandise in Nome. That's where he met Charles Brown, who was a banker from Montreal. Uh, as the boom in Nome died down, first Brown came down to Valdez and was working in mainly real estate deals, I believe. Uh, T.W. went down, met him there in Valdez, and they did a few things together, but he was a little bit disenchanted and was waiting for the ship to go south when the Santa Ana came in. The Santa Ana was a ship that was chartered by the Alaska Railroad Company to come in and open up Seward, which was to be their tidewater port for the Alaska Railroad. Uh, T.W. liked what he saw and started the business here. Later, Brown came over and joined him. Uh, and in those days, they became merchant bankers. Uh, what else did they do? They were into everything. They were ships agents. They acted as agents for the sled dog teams that were taking supplies and that into the interior. Uh,
They were the Western Union office.
they were.
Yeah.
I always thought that was solid.
No, it was here first.
They we know from pictures that they sold coal by the ton. Uh, they of course had the grocery store, hardware store, and dry goods. Uh,
And gold came down from the Nome Fields to Seward by dog sled and then went out to the lower 48 on the steamship.
and let's see. I found a catalog here in the basement, and I meant to say in the early 20s, Brown and Hawkins, the stock was traded on the New York Stock Exchange. So I understand that T.W. bought all the stock back just before the Black Friday, the stock market crash. Uh, but I found this catalog from 1926, and they were selling groceries, dry goods. I'm looking for the index on the thing. It was, I had it here just earlier. Food, clothing, miscellaneous, which included tarps, tents, kettles, coffee pots, compasses, uh, toilet paper, blanket pins, revolvers, you name it. They sold it. They were the center for supplies, and Seward in those days was the the big transportation hub. It was the terminus of the Alaska Railroad. Uh, any Anything came up from the lower 48, it came to Seward. If it was going westward from here, it was usually loaded on smaller ships and set out there. If it was going to the interior, it went by dog sled in the early days and by railroad in the later days.
Did you mention the ship that the barge they had up near Anchorage for
No.
people to trade at?
No. When they were building the railroad and they had large crews working up in the Cook Inlet area, and they also had active mining claims in that area, Brown and Hawkins chartered a barge called the Bertha, and they loaded the Bertha with supplies here in Seward and towed it up into the Cook's Inlet, into the area which is now Anchorage. They towed it up there and they anchored it. So it sat on the mud flats in the low tides. In the high tides, of course, it floated. And if anybody was going someplace, they said, "Where are you going?" Well, they were going down to the Anchorage for supplies. And that's how Anchorage got its name. It's from Brown and Hawkins' barge being anchored out there. Talking about unusual events, and I can't. A story doesn't come to mind. Is it?
No.
The one my mother used to tell all the time was when she was a little girl, the bakery was right next door to our store, and that was the meeting place. You'd go in there for coffee and a donut or cookies or stuff like that. And somebody had found an orphaned moose and raised it so it was very comfortable around people and things like that. And the people coming out of the coffee shop would give this moose cookies, and he got quite a taste for cookies. And he got to a point as he grew up where you couldn't get out of the bakery without a cookie to give the moose because he'd pin you against the wall and wouldn't let you go.
And we still often have bears and moose downtown, especially in the winter. The bears in the late spring when they're looking for food, and the moose in the winter when they're trying to get away from snow.
Information about the earthquake, '64 earthquake. Neither Iris or I were up here at the time. I was in Los Angeles, and Iris was probably someplace in Tennessee. But it did cut off the Kenai Peninsula from the rest of Alaska. And at that time, the main payroll and the main job in Seward was longshoring. And being isolated like that allowed the port of Anchorage to get established. Nobody had ever gone up there and really established the port until this time, because Cook Inlet has the second highest tides in the world, and it gets huge ice flows in the wintertime. But in spite of that, after the earthquake, when we were isolated, they established the port of Anchorage, and Seward, the economy in Seward has been stifled, I guess you'd say, ever since.
Which our economy now is mainly tourism.
Yes, that's true. Oh, thing just went blank.
Whoops.
I'm talking to an empty spot. What was the next one he wanted? Earthquake stories to share. We really don't have any earthquake stories. As I said, I was in Los Angeles. I was working for United Airlines at the time, and I heard about this earthquake up here, and the first reports recorded. First of all, it was dark up here. You know, it was wintertime, and this guy said he was flying over Seward. He says, well, what used to be Seward. He said anything that wasn't flattened by the earthquake is burning now. And there were big gasoline storage tanks right on our coastline. And during the earthquake, they ruptured. And all this gasoline was floating out in the bay and was on fire when this guy went over. And so he mistook it for the town. And it was actually the bay that was on fire. So anyhow, I was listening to these reports, and I says, well, gosh, if mom and dad are still alive, they'll need my help. So I pack a bag, I get in there. I says, well, this is silly. I know the airport is closed in Anchorage, where we fly into. I know it's closed because the control tower collapsed. So I'd say, well, what's going to happen is I'll get as far as Seattle, then nobody will be able to contact me if they're alive. And so that's it. I would pack my bags and I go unpack my bags and wonder what I was going to do to help my folks. And finally, about 3 days after the earthquake, a ham radio operator called me up and says, your mother wants you to know that everybody's okay up here. So that was my extent in the earthquake.
There is an earthquake movie every day during the summer at the library, though, for visitors to look at and see what happened here.
Was it a difficult decision to close the store? Well, the store has been part of Alaska since 1900, and it's been part of Seward since the town began. Granddad was on the first boat in here, and Seward very definitely is part of it. So in a way, it's hard to close a good portion of history, but the next generation coming up had no interest in coming up here, and it was time for Iris and I to close the store. So it really wasn't as hard as I thought it would be. It was, the time is right, so it wasn't that hard. Did you entertain thoughts of liquidating the store on your own? Yes, we did. And I'm so glad that we didn't, because not only would we have...
we'd still be here.
We'd still be here, and the profits would be much, much less. Graham has been a real enlightenment. I wish we'd known now, or knew then what we know now. We would have done a lot better all through, but I'm certainly glad we didn't decide to liquidate on our own. Why did you decide to hire professionals? Well, there was another store in town that closed, and she highly recommended going to a professional, not particularly the one we chose, but she highly recommended it, and quite frankly, we were tired. We didn't want to run it ourselves.
Right. Actually, we did a little research, and I'm glad we chose Wingate Sales. Another company had been pretty anxious and doing a lot of mailings to us, and that's the one that was chosen by the other store in town about 6 years ago. But the professional that did the closing for her had worked for that company at that time, and now he had joined Wingate, so that was very part of our making the decision to go with Wingate. Plus, I liked Mr. Wingate after I talked to him.
Yes, but it was, we were basically unaware that there was groups that did just specialize in closeout sales and that. Well, until this store in Seward closed. Uh,
But we did a lot of research on it. We interviewed 4 different companies, and as I said, having Graham Bullock working for Wingate was one of the determining factors. But also, we liked the overall program that Wingate had, and we felt very comfortable after discussing closing the store with Mr. Wingate personally, which meant a lot. That's it, I think.
no, it wasn't.
Well, he can edit anything out.
Yeah, we can change up.
He says it in all.
Is that good enough for you?
I think it's wonderful. Absolutely
I felt like a
wonderful.
bump on the